The morning Zara found the contract, she was supposed to be invisible. That was how it always worked. She stayed near the edges of rooms. She kept her eyes on whatever book she'd tucked in her bag. She did not speak unless someone spoke to her first, and even then she answered in as few words as possible because her mother had explained it to her carefully and more than once. We are guests in these spaces, baby. We move quiet. We don't draw attention. We do our job, and we go home. Her mother, Celeste Carter, had worked for Whitmore Capital for 3 years. Head of Document Services, which was a formal title for something that most of the executives on the 42nd floor had never thought about twice. The woman who handled the preparation, binding, distribution, and confidential destruction of every significant document that passed through the firm. Contracts, amendments, due diligence reports, the kind of paperwork that made fortunes and ended careers. Celeste knew the weight of every page. She had never read a single one that wasn't hers to read. Zara was 11 years old. She had her mother's eyes, wide set, observant, the kind that moved across a room the way a camera moves, cataloging everything without appearing to look at anything. She had her mother's patience, too, though hers was younger and therefore sharper, not yet worn smooth by years of practicing quiet. It was a Thursday in October. Zara was at the office because her school had a half-day for teacher training and the after-school program didn't open until 3, and Celeste's boss had said it was fine as long as the girls stayed in the document room and didn't wander. The document room was where Celeste worked, a large, climate-controlled space on the 41st floor, one floor below the executive suites, lined with industrial printers and heavy-gauge shredders and rows of labeled filing cabinets. It smelled like paper and toner and the faint chemical coolness of the air conditioning. Zara had brought 3 books and a small sketch pad. She sat in the corner at a work table her mother had cleared for her, drawing the plants that lined the window ledge, a row of succulents that someone had arranged there years ago and forgotten to water, though they had survived anyway, the way certain things do. She was on her 3rd sketch when her mother took the service elevator to the storage archive 1 floor below, leaving Zara with instructions to stay put and the comforting assurance that she'd be back in 20 minutes. Zara stayed put for about 7 minutes. Then she needed to use the restroom, and the restroom in the document room was occupied by one of the technicians running a large print job, and Celeste had shown her last month where the secondary restroom was, down the hall, left at the supply closet, 2nd door on the right. Zara took the route exactly as she'd been shown. She went down the hall. She turned left at the supply closet, and that was when she saw the door. It was the door to the executive conference room, the small one, the one her mother called the satellite room, used for private meetings that required less visibility than the main conference suite on 42. The door was slightly ajar, not open enough to see inside from the hallway, but open enough that voices carried. Zara would have kept walking. She was very good at keeping walking, but one of the voices said her mother's name. Not Celeste. Her full name. Celeste Carter. Zara stopped. She stood outside the supply closet door, close enough to the wall that she was mostly hidden if anyone looked out from the conference room. And she listened. Not because she was curious. Not because she was being disobedient. Because when a child hears a parent's name spoken in a certain tone, a tone that is careful and clipped and private, the body understands before the mind does that something is wrong. There were 2 voices, a man and a woman. The woman, Zara didn't recognize. The voice was controlled, professional, and underneath the professionalism there was something she couldn't name yet, a quality she would understand better later, when she was older as calculation. The man's voice she did recognize. She had heard it twice, once in the lobby when she'd come with her mother to pick up a forgotten badge, and once on the television in the waiting area on 42. Deep and unhurried, the kind of voice that had learned over many years not to raise itself. Dominic Whitmore, owner of Whitmore Capital. Founder. The name on the wall and the letterhead and the glass door on the ground floor. 44 years old. According to the profile her mother had pointed to once in a business magazine left in the break room, with the pride of someone who works for an institution they genuinely respect. Built this from $100,000 and a rental office, Celeste had said. Started when he was 22. She'd said it the way she said most things, factually, without embellishment, But Zara had heard the note underneath it, the quiet admiration her mother reserved for people who built things that lasted. The woman was talking about a contract. Zara didn't understand all of it. She was 11, and some of the words were legal words, business words, the kind that meant several things at once and required years of context to parse correctly. But she understood enough. She understood more than anyone would have expected, because she had grown up in a house where her mother came home, sometimes talking through the logic of complex documents the way other parents talk through the logic of the day, because thinking out loud was how Celeste processed, and Zara had always listened. What she understood was this. The woman was describing a contract that Dominic Whitmore was preparing to sign. A major one, a partnership agreement with a development company called Meridian Group. The woman was explaining something about the terms. She was explaining it in a way that sounded helpful and thorough, the way a trusted advisor explains things. But there was a section she was not mentioning. Zara knew there was a section she was not mentioning because the woman's voice had a shape. It moved over certain things quickly and slowed on others, and the things it moved over quickly were the things that should have been the point. She knew this because of her mother, because Celeste had once explained, sitting at their small kitchen table with a manual she was reviewing for an executive training, that the most dangerous language in any document is the language that sounds like something else. If someone wants you not to read something, Celeste had said, tapping the manual with one finger, they bury it in something you will read. You put the poison next to the medicine and let people assume it's all medicine. Zara did not fully understand what was being hidden in the contract, but she understood that something was being hidden, and she understood who was about to sign it. She used the restroom. She walked back down the hall. She sat at her table and opened her sketch pad, and she thought, if this story already has you leaning in, hit that like button and subscribe to Bound Hearts, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She didn't hesitate for a second. Let's see if you can stay with her all the way to the end. This is what you need to know about Zara Carter before anything else happens. She was not precocious in the way that makes adults uncomfortable. She was not theatrical about her intelligence or eager to demonstrate it. She was the opposite, genuinely understated, the kind of child who knew things quietly and held them, who observed without performing observation. Her teachers sometimes wrote on report cards that she was a pleasure to have in class, but could participate more actively, which was a polite way of saying that she watched everything and said very little, and adults did not always know what to do with that combination in an 11-year-old. She had grown up watching her mother navigate rooms where she was underestimated, and she had learned from this not resentment, but acuity. Zara noticed things. She cataloged them. She filed them away in the part of her mind that worked like a very organized drawer, things in the right order, nothing misplaced. She noticed, for instance, the way certain executives in the lobby spoke to her mother differently, depending on whether someone was watching. She noticed the way her mother's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, almost not at all. In those moments, the way she absorbed the small rudeness with the same composure she brought to everything, and the way she did not mention it afterward, and the way that not mentioning was its own kind of strength. She noticed the way her mother touched documents. Carefully, reverently, almost. Not because Celeste was sentimental about paper, but because she understood what paper carried, the weight of decisions, of obligations, of promises and threats dressed in legal language. Every page matters, she'd said once. Not every page looks like it matters, but every page does. Zara had absorbed this the way children absorb the deepest lessons of their parents, not as a rule to follow, but as a way of seeing. So when she sat at the work table with her sketch pad and thought about what she'd heard outside the satellite room, she was not panicking. She was organizing. She was putting things in order. She knew 3 things with certainty. 1. Dominic Whitmore was about to sign a contract with Meridian Group. 2. There was something in that contract that the woman in the satellite room had not told him. 3. Her mother's name had been mentioned in that room, and not in a way that sounded incidental. That last thing, that was the one that pressed hardest against the inside of her chest. She did not know what it meant yet. She did not have enough pieces. But she had learned from watching her mother that when you don't have enough pieces, you don't invent the missing ones. You wait. You watch. You let the picture fill itself in. Her mother returned from the archive 25 minutes after she'd left. She came in carrying 2 large boxes of archival folders and set them on the work table with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done the same physical task 10,000 times. "You good?" Celeste asked. "Yes," Zara said. She did not say what she'd heard. Not yet, because she didn't know enough yet, and she needed to know more before she said anything, and because she knew, from everything she had watched and absorbed, that speaking too early with not enough information was how good people got dismissed. She would not be dismissed. She went back to drawing the succulents. Dominic Whitmore did not like October. He associated it with the memory of his first major loss, a deal that had fallen apart 17 years ago, a partnership that had seemed solid and proven to be anything but. He had learned more from that loss than from any of his subsequent successes. He had learned, specifically, that the most dangerous moment in any negotiation is the moment you believe it's done. The moment the papers are ready and the handshakes are scheduled and the announcements are drafted and you allow yourself to feel, however briefly, that the thing is settled. Nothing is settled until it's signed and funded and 3 months old. He told this to the young analysts who rotated through his office in their first years at the firm. He told it without drama, as a simple fact of the business. Most of them nodded with the particular earnest attentiveness of people who have not yet learned something through experience and therefore understand it only as a concept. Dominic understood it through his body. He was in his corner office on the 42nd floor when Renata Hollis, his chief strategy officer, brought him the Meridian contract for his review. This was the 3rd time he'd reviewed it. The first 2 passes had been preliminary, and this was the final sign-off version. Renata had overseen the negotiations herself. She had worked at Whitmore Capital for 11 years, longer than most of his executive team, and she was methodical and precise and had never, in his recollection, brought him a document she hadn't fully understood herself. The Meridian Group partnership was a significant one. $70 million over 3 years, a joint development project in the Eastern Waterfront District, a flagship investment that would expand Whitmore Capital's portfolio into urban infrastructure in a way Dominic had been building toward for 2 years. "Everything looks clean," Renata said. She set the contract on his desk in a leather portfolio, the kind Celeste from Document Services always used for final sign-off packages. "The liability structure is straightforward. The oversight clause is what we negotiated, and the exit provisions are standard. Legal reviewed it twice." Dominic opened the portfolio. He turned to the first page. He read the way he always read, methodically, unhurried, the way he'd taught himself to read documents in his early 20s when he'd first understood that speed reading a contract was the same as not reading it at all. He was on page 8 of 32 when his phone buzzed. It was his assistant, asking about the Thursday morning board briefing, which he'd been meaning to reschedule for a week. He made a mental note, set the phone face down, and went back to the contract. Page 12, page 15, page 18. He paused on page 19. There was a subclause. Section 7.4c. It was embedded in a paragraph about oversight protocols between 2 longer clauses about reporting requirements and dispute resolution timelines. The language was dense, technical, and had been drafted in a way that made it appear to be a continuation of the reporting clause rather than a standalone provision. Dominic read it twice. He read it a 3rd time. Then he set the portfolio down on his desk, carefully, and looked out the window at the October sky. Section 7.4c granted Meridian Group the unilateral right to request an independent operational audit of any Whitmore Capital project within the joint venture, including projects not directly associated with the Meridian partnership, if Meridian determined in its sole discretion that such projects presented a material risk exposure to the partnership's objectives. The definition of material risk exposure was circular and broad. It included language that could, in a hostile reading, be applied to virtually anything. This was not what he had negotiated. What he had negotiated was a mutual audit provision, both parties could request audits, with a neutral third-party arbiter determining whether a request was legitimate. This clause was not mutual. This clause gave Meridian access to his firm's other operations, unilaterally, under terms he had never agreed to. He put his hand flat on the portfolio. He breathed out once through his nose. He did not call Renata immediately. Instead, he sat very still for approximately 2 minutes, doing the thing he had taught himself to do in moments like this. Not react, not panic, not conclude. Just look. Let the shape of the thing become clear before you decide what it means. The shape of this thing was not reassuring. He was reaching for his phone when the knock came at his office door. The contract had been sitting in the document room for 3 days before it went up to 42. Zara had not known it was there. She had not been looking for it. What she had been doing the afternoon of the second day was helping her mother reorganize the filing system for the third-quarter archival folders, a task she'd volunteered for because she liked systems and because sitting still in the document room while her mother worked felt like something she ought to offer to help with. Her mother had given her the responsibility of the outgoing review files. These were documents that had been reviewed and cleared for final distribution, the last stop before they went up to the executive floor. Her job was to check the labels against the log sheet and confirm that each file's routing code matched the distribution list. She had been doing this for about 40 minutes when she pulled a folder from the second-to-last stack and looked at the label. Meridian Group, Partnership Agreement, Final Review, Distribution, Office of D. Whitmore, 42F. She stared at the label for a moment. Then she thought of the satellite room. The careful voice. The things not said. She set the folder down. She knew she was not supposed to open it. The documents in this room were not hers to read. Her mother had made this clear, and it was a clear thing. Not an arbitrary rule, but a principle, the same principle her mother lived by. You handle other people's business with care, and you don't step into it. Zara understood this principle completely. She also understood, with the particular clarity of a child who has been paying very careful attention to the world for 11 years, that there are moments when the principle and the right thing point in different directions. And those moments require you to hold both things at once and choose, and to be willing to live with what you chose. She opened the folder. She was not a lawyer. She was not a business analyst. She was 11 years old, and she had spent a great deal of time in her 11 years listening to her mother explain, in plain language, what documents meant, not as formal instruction, but as thinking out loud, as the working through of complexity that Celeste did to decompress from the precision her job required. She read the contract in 45 minutes. She read it twice. She did not read all of it. She focused on the sections that matched the shape of what she'd heard in the satellite room, the things the woman's voice had moved over quickly. She found section 7.4c. She read it 4 times, and she thought about what her mother had said about the medicine and the poison, about how you bury the dangerous thing in the thing people will assume is safe. She closed the folder. She put it back exactly where she'd found it. She checked the remaining files against the log sheet and finished the task her mother had given her. And when her mother came back from lunch, she said, "All done." And her mother said, "Good girl." And that was that. But Zara was very quiet for the rest of the afternoon. And she was thinking. Underscore. She didn't tell her mother. She had thought about this carefully, the way she thought about most things, which was to lay out the facts and the possibilities and the consequences in the order they were likely to matter. If she told her mother, Celeste would have 2 choices. She could dismiss it. She might assume Zara had misunderstood or was overreacting because Zara was 11 and this was a major corporate contract and there were lawyers involved and surely someone would have caught this. Or she could take it seriously, in which case she would have to act on it. And the ways she could act on it were limited, and all of them put Celeste's job at risk. Celeste had worked at Whitmore Capital for 3 years. She needed this job. They needed this job, the 2 of them, in their 2-bedroom apartment with the slightly too loud heating system and the good but not great school in the right district, where Zara had a desk near the window and books she loved and a life that was exactly as stable as her mother's paycheck. Her mother had made this stability with her own hands. She had made it carefully over years, and she guarded it the way she guarded everything she valued. Not with anxiety, but with quiet, consistent attention. To place it at risk, Zara would need to be sure. More than sure. She was not yet sure of everything. She was sure of what she'd read in the contract. She was less sure about what it meant, and she was not sure at all about who else knew, or whether the woman in the satellite room was alone in this, or what exactly her mother's name being mentioned had to do with anything. So she needed more information, and she needed to find a way to give that information to the right person, directly, without going through channels that could be closed before she reached the end. There was only one right person. She had heard his voice in the satellite room. The problem was she was 11 years old, and he owned the building. She had one advantage. The document room handled the final review packages for every significant transaction at Whitmore Capital. The Meridian contract, once it cleared document services, would be hand-delivered to the 42nd floor. And the person who hand-delivered final review packages was Celeste Carter, because Celeste had established this protocol herself 3 years ago, after an incident involving a misrouted contract that had caused 3 days of chaos. Since then, Celeste personally delivered every final sign-off package to the relevant executive. Zara knew this. She also knew that on delivery days, Celeste sometimes let her come along because the 42nd floor had a small waiting area with good natural light, and Celeste could leave her there for the 5 minutes the delivery took, and the elevator ride up was one of the small treats of the day, spent mostly in a room that smelled like toner. The Meridian contract was scheduled for delivery Thursday morning. Zara had 36 hours. She spent those hours doing what she always did. She thought carefully, she planned, and she tried to prepare for what she could not control. What she could not control was whether Dominic Whitmore would listen to her. She had heard things about him, secondhand things, from her mother's assessments, which were always practical and fair. He was private. He was disciplined. He was not unkind, but he was not warm in the way that made people feel known. He was the kind of person who trusted systems over impulse, process over gut feeling, which meant he was unlikely to listen to an 11-year-old girl who appeared in his waiting room and said she needed to talk to him about a contract. She needed something more than words. She needed evidence. She could not take the contract, but she did have something. She had the log sheet, the one she'd been using when she found the Meridian folder. She had copied section 7.4c into her sketchpad, not because she'd planned to exactly, but because when she was thinking hard about something, she wrote it down, and she had written it down 3 times from memory after she closed the folder until she had it exactly right. She was very good at exactly right. Her mother said this sometimes with a mixture of pride and mild exasperation. You remember things word for word. Baby, that's a skill and a burden. She had the language. She had the section number. She had, most importantly, a very clear memory of what she'd heard in the satellite room and the ability to explain, in plain terms, what the clause did. Whether that would be enough, she genuinely didn't know. She fell asleep the night before the delivery, thinking about her mother's face the first time she'd explained a complex document in simple terms, sitting at the kitchen table, pointing to a clause and saying, "See how this sounds like it protects you? Read it again." It doesn't. That was what she would do. She would make him read it again. Thursday morning. The document room at 7:45. Celeste in her good blazer. She always wore her good blazer on delivery days, preparing the final Meridian package in the leather portfolio. Zara was eating her breakfast at the work table. A small container of yogurt, a granola bar. She had brought her book, but she wasn't reading it. "You can come up with me if you want," her mother said, without looking up from the portfolio. "But you stay in the waiting area. You don't wander." "Okay," Zara said. This was the first time she had said something she did not entirely mean to her mother in 11 years. She intended to stay in the waiting area. She intended, at some point, to not stay in the waiting area. She did not think her mother would forgive her for this easily, and she held that knowledge carefully because it mattered to her and because she thought it was important to hold the things that mattered even when you were about to do something complicated. The elevator to 42 was quiet. Her mother reviewed the routing checklist one more time. Zara looked at the brushed metal walls and thought about what she was going to say. She had planned it carefully. She had thought through every version she could imagine. She had prepared for dismissal, for impatience, for being told this wasn't her business, for being told to wait for an adult. She was ready to be dismissed once. She was ready to try again. She was not leaving without trying. The elevator doors opened. The 42nd floor was the quietest floor of the building. Not because nothing happened there. Everything happened there. But because the people who worked there had learned to move and speak at a calibrated volume, as if sound itself required a level of restraint appropriate to the decisions being made. The carpet was thick. The light was even. There were small sculptures and alcoves along the corridor, and Zara noticed all of them, cataloged them, filed them, and continued walking beside her mother toward the executive assistant's desk. Her mother checked in. The assistant smiled and indicated that Mr. Whitmore was available. She'd been told the package was coming. She'd let him know. And then her mother turned to Zara and pointed at the row of chairs in the waiting area, low and upholstered, and facing a window that looked out over the city. "Right here," she said. "Right here," Zara agreed. Her mother walked down the corridor toward the corner office. Zara sat. She counted to 30. Then she stood up. The executive assistant was on the phone, turned slightly away. The corridor was quiet. The corner office was at the end of the hall, 40 feet, maybe. The door was ajar. Zara walked. She did not run. Running was for people who were panicking. She was not panicking. She was 11 years old, and she was walking down a corridor in a building where she was not supposed to be walking, and she was about to knock on the door of a man she had never spoken to and tell him something that was going to be very hard to explain. She raised her hand. She knocked. Her mother's voice from inside the office went very still. The pause before the door opened fully felt long. Zara stood straight. She had her sketch pad in her hands because she had brought it from the waiting area. She had thought she might need it. Dominic Whitmore opened the door. He was taller than she'd expected from the television profile. He had a quality her mother sometimes called presence. Not loudness, not forcefulness, but a kind of density, like someone who takes up the right amount of space and no more. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been surprised in a way he has not been surprised in a long time. Her mother was beside him, face unreadable, which was the face she made when she was trying very hard to be professional about something that was distressing her considerably. "Zara," her mother said. The word was quiet and contained the entire conversation they were about to have later. "I know," Zara said. She looked at Dominic Whitmore. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I need to tell you something about the contract." He looked at her for a moment. He looked at Celeste. He looked at the sketch pad in Zara's hands. "Mr. Whitmore," Celeste said, very carefully, "I apologize. She was supposed to stay in the waiting area. I'll take her back, and she can stay," Dominic said. His voice was exactly as she remembered from the satellite room. Unhurried, measured. But there was something in it now that hadn't been there before, a quality of attention that felt different from the dismissal Zara had prepared for. He stepped back and held the door open. "What do you need to tell me about the contract?" Zara walked into the office. She stopped 3 feet inside the door because she did not want to seem like she was taking up space she hadn't been given. She looked at the leather portfolio open on his desk. She looked at him. "There's a section you need to read again," she said. "Section 7.4, see? It's on page 19. It's written so it looks like part of the reporting clause, but it isn't. It gives Meridian Group the right to audit your other projects, not just the joint venture. Everything." The silence in the room was complete. Her mother had not moved. Dominic Whitmore had not moved. He was looking at her with an expression she had not prepared for. Not dismissal, Not amusement, not the patient condescension of an adult managing a child who has said something charming. He was looking at her the way she had seen her mother look at a document that had just revealed something, like someone paying real attention. Page 19, he said. Section 7.4, C, she said. It's in the middle of the paragraph, after the reporting requirements. It reads like it's part of that, but it's not. He turned. He walked to his desk. He picked up the portfolio. He found page 19, and Zara watched his face change. He read it once. He read it twice. The third time, he set the portfolio down exactly as he had before, carefully, deliberately, the way a person sets something down when they need their hands free to think. Zara stood where she was. She did not speak. She had learned this from her mother, that there are moments when speaking fills a space that needs to stay open, and the impulse to fill silence is almost always about the speaker's comfort, not the listener's need. Her mother was still near the door. Celeste's face had moved from unreadable to something more complex. Not quite fear, not quite pride, the particular expression of a parent watching a child do something they had never asked for and cannot entirely disown. "Where did you read this?" Dominic said. He was not looking at her yet. He was still looking at the contract. "In the document room," Zara said. "The day before yesterday. I was helping my mom with the outgoing review files. It was in the stack." A pause. Then he looked up. "You read a 32-page contract." "The parts that mattered," she said. "I didn't read all of it. I read the sections about oversight and auditing because I'd heard." She stopped. He noticed the stop. "You'd heard what?" This was the moment she had thought about the most. Not because she was afraid of it, but because she had known it would come and she had not been entirely certain what the right answer was. She had decided, after a great deal of thought, that the right answer was the true one. 2 days ago, she said, I was going to the restroom down the hall. The satellite room door was open a little. I heard someone talking about the contract. A woman. And you. The quality of attention in the room shifted. She felt it. Not dramatically, not like something breaking, but like a barometric change, the kind you feel in your ears before a storm. "What did you hear?" His voice had not risen. It had, if anything, gotten quieter. She was explaining the contract. But she didn't explain Section 7.4c. She went through the oversight provisions, and she described them as standard, and then she kept going. "I didn't know it at the time. I figured it out when I read the contract in the document room." Dominic Whitmore sat down, not with the heaviness of a man defeated, with the deliberateness of a man who has just received information that requires him to sit down and look at it calmly. He put his elbows on the desk. He laced his hands together. He said, "What's your name?" "Zara Carter. Celeste's daughter." "Yes, sir." He looked at her mother. Celeste was standing very still, with the posture of someone who has decided that any movement at all might make the situation worse, and is therefore making no movements. "She works for me," he said. "I know that. And you came in here anyway." Zara looked at him directly. "You were about to sign it." Another silence. Longer this time. Outside the window, the October sky was doing something complicated. Clouds moving in from the west, the light shifting from sharp to diffuse, the kind of afternoon light that makes everything look slightly uncertain. He picked up the contract again. He found page 19. He read section 7.4. See? A fourth time, and this time Zara could see that he was reading it differently. Not as a final review pass, but as a reconstruction, working backward from what he was seeing on the page to what the page had been designed to make him miss. He set it down. He looked at her. "Who was the woman?" he said. "The one in the satellite room." Zara hesitated, not because she was unsure of the answer, but because she recognized the weight of what she was about to say. "I don't know her name," she said, "but I've seen her in the building before. She has very short hair. She wears glasses with thin silver frames. She was carrying a folder with a green tab on it." A pause, so brief it barely existed. "Renata," he said. Not a question. He did not say it loudly. He did not say it with anger, exactly. He said it the way you say the name of something you've just identified, the name of a thing that was in front of you all along, that you simply had not yet called by its right name. Zara said nothing. Her mother said nothing. Dominic Whitmore looked at the contract for a long moment. Then he looked at Zara again. "Tell me exactly what you heard," he said. "Not what you think it means. What you heard, word for word, as best you can remember. Zara took a breath. She told him, underscore, 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 she had a good memory. She had always had a good memory. The word-for-word kind her mother had identified early and treated as a feature of Zara's mind rather than a performance of it, something to be respected and occasionally worked around but never shown off. She told him what she'd heard in the order she'd heard it. She did not dramatize. She did not editorialize. She reported it the way she'd watched her mother report things. Factually, with precision, without the small inflations that make a story feel more urgent than it is. He listened without interrupting. This surprised her a little. She had expected him to stop her, to ask clarifying questions, to redirect, to take over the way adults often took over when a child was trying to explain something, but he didn't. He sat with his hands still and his eyes on her, and he listened to all of it. When she finished, there was a pause. The green tab folder, he said. You remember that specifically. My mom color codes the review folders by project category, Zara said. Green is development deals. I've seen her do it. I didn't know what project it was for at the time, but when I read the Meridian contract, I thought about the green tab. He looked at her mother. Celeste, who had remained very still throughout all of this, met his eyes. Mrs. Carter, he said, has the Renata Hollis ever accessed the document room outside standard distribution requests? Celeste took a small breath. Once that I'm aware of, sir. About 3 weeks ago. She said she was picking up a corrections package for a document that had already gone through final review. I didn't pull the package myself. One of the technicians handled it. Which document? I need to check the log. He nodded. He picked up his desk phone and said 3 words into it. Hold my calls. Then he set it down and looked at Zara. I'm going to ask you to do something, he said. Zara waited. I'm going to ask you to stay in this office for a few more minutes. Not the waiting room. Here. I need to make a phone call, and I'd like to be able to ask you follow-up questions. She looked at her mother. Her mother looked at him. She can stay, Celeste said. The quality of her voice had shifted, still professional, still precise, but underneath it something that Zara recognized as the voice her mother used where she had made a decision that she was not entirely sure of and was making anyway. But I should be here too. Of course, he said. He made the phone call. He spoke quietly, not so quietly that they couldn't hear, but in the tone of someone who is accustomed to conducting business with people nearby and has calibrated his voice accordingly. He called someone named Greer, who was apparently on his legal team, and he said 3 things. He needed someone to pull the original negotiated draft of the Meridian Partnership Agreement, the version from 6 weeks ago. He needed the change log for every revision made to the document since then, and he needed that information in this office in the next 20 minutes. He hung up. He looked at Zara and said, Do you want something to drink? She blinked. No, thank you. There's water on the credenza, he said. And I think there are granola bars in the top drawer. My assistant keeps them there because I forget to eat lunch. He said this in a completely ordinary tone, as if they were not in the middle of something significant, and Zara understood that this was its own kind of skill, the ability to provide a small normal moment in the middle of a large abnormal one. She filed it away. I'm okay, she said. He looked at the contract again. Then he looked at her. How did you know it was a problem? He said. Section 7.4c. What made you stop on it? Zara thought about how to answer this. My mom talks about documents, she said. Not the details, she wouldn't do that, but the way they work. The way they could be written to look like one thing and mean something else. She paused. She said once that the dangerous language is always next to the language you trust. So you assume it's safe. He looked at Celeste. Celeste had the expression of a person who has just heard something said about them that is accurate and unexpected and requires a small internal adjustment. She's right, he said to Celeste. I know, Celeste said. You taught her that. I suppose I did, Celeste said. I didn't mean to teach her to read other people's contracts. No, he said. I imagine not. He looked at Zara again. I'm glad she did. underscore 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 if this story has found you. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Bound Hearts. The best ones are still coming, and the people who watch to the end are exactly the ones who need to hear them. Underscore 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 the change log arrived in 18 minutes. It was a young man from legal named Porter who brought it, barely older than 30, with the look of someone who had run from his desk to the elevator and was trying to appear as though he hadn't. He handed Dominic a file and stood near the door, looking at Zara and Celeste with the polite confusion of someone who expected a legal meeting and arrived at something else. "Thank you," Dominic said, and looked at the file. Zara watched his face. She had gotten good at reading his face in the last 40 minutes. Not because his face was expressive, it wasn't, but because she was good at detecting small changes in still things. A slight tightening at the corners of his eyes. The particular quality of stillness that meant he was processing something significant rather than something routine. He found what he was looking for on the third page of the changelog. She knew he'd found it because the stillness changed. It went from the stillness of a man reading to the stillness of a man who has stopped reading because he has already understood. The audit provision, he said. Section 7.4. He looked up at Porter. When was it added to the document? Porter moved forward and looked over his shoulder. The last revision cycle, he said. 4 days ago. Redline version 7. Who made the change? Porter found the entry. He looked at it for a moment. It's marked as a final cleanup edit. No authorship flag. It's attributed to the general document account. Dominic set the file down. He looked at Zara. You said the woman in the satellite room was carrying a folder with a green tab, he said. And she mentioned the contract. She was explaining it to you, Zara said. Or she was describing it. Like a briefing. And she didn't mention this section. She talked about the oversight provisions and described them as Zara paused because she wanted to get it exactly right. She said they were standard mutual oversight mechanisms, consistent with what we negotiated. And then she moved on. He was quiet for a moment. They're not mutual, he said. No, Zara said. Section 7.4, C, only gives Meridian the right. Not you. He looked at Celeste. When was the Meridian package prepared for final delivery? It came to Document Services on Monday, Celeste said. Standard 3-day processing. It was scheduled for delivery this morning. She paused. Which is today? He looked at the contract. The portfolio was still open on his desk to page 19. He had not signed it. He had been about to sign it when Zara knocked on his door. Underscore The next 30 minutes were not what Zara had expected. She had not honestly been sure what she had expected, some version of things being resolved, decisions being made, the weight lifting. What happened instead was quieter than that. Dominic Whitmore asked Celeste to step outside with Porter for a moment. He said this without making it feel like a dismissal. He told Celeste specifically that he needed to ask her daughter a few more questions and that it would be better if she wasn't in the room when he did, so that Zara could answer freely. And he said this with the directness of a person who has learned that honesty about the reason for a request is less distressing than the request itself. Celeste looked at Zara. Zara gave a small nod. Her mother and Porter went into the corridor. Dominic Whitmore leaned back in his chair and looked at Zara across his desk and said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand that there is no wrong answer. Zara said, Okay. Your mother's name was mentioned in the satellite room. He wasn't asking. He had caught the thing she hadn't finished saying 30 minutes ago, and he had held it, and now he was bringing it back. She had not expected this. She had prepared for many things, but not for him to have been paying that level of attention to a half-finished sentence from an 11-year-old. She said yes. What was said? She thought about it. She had been over this many times in her own mind, trying to extract what she'd actually heard from what she might have imagined hearing. The woman said, she said there was one potential complication with the documentation trail. She said the woman in document services was, she said, meticulous. And then the other voice said something I couldn't hear clearly. And the woman said she'd handled it. The room was very quiet. She'd handled it, he said. Yes. He was still. The particular density of him was more present in that stillness than it had been before, as if whatever was happening inside him was pulling gravity toward it. What do you think that means? He asked. Zara looked at him. I don't know, she said, but I think it means something about the document. About the document trail. She paused. My mom takes the documentation chain very seriously. She keeps records of everything that comes through the room. What version, what date, who requested changes. She'd be able to see if the document was altered after it came to document services. She paused again. I think that's why her name came up. He said nothing for a moment. Is your mother in any trouble? Zara asked. She had not planned to ask this. It came out of the place where she had been holding it for 2 days without her deciding to release it. She heard her own voice say it, and then it was in the room. He looked at her steadily. Not if I can help it, he said. She believed him. She was not certain why she believed him. She did not know him, and she had not been given reasons to trust him beyond this conversation. But there was something in the way he'd said it that had no performance in it. It was not the reassurance of someone who says things to make people feel better. It was the statement of a person who has just added something to a list of things they are going to do. She nodded. He looked at the contract one more time. Then he closed the portfolio. I'm going to ask you not to discuss what you heard in the satellite room with anyone, he said. Not yet. Not until I've had a chance to understand the full picture. Can you do that? Yes, she said. That includes not discussing it with your mother. At least not in detail, until I've spoken to her myself. There may be things she needs to be protected from knowing right now. He paused. I know that's an unusual thing to ask of someone your age. Zara said, it's okay. He looked at her for a moment with the particular expression she was still learning to name, the one that wasn't quite surprise, exactly, but was adjacent to it. Like a recalibration. How old are you? He said. 11. Right? He said, as if reminding himself of a fact he'd been intermittently forgetting. He stood. He came around the desk. Not toward her, but toward the door, which he opened. Her mother was in the corridor with Porter, turned away, speaking quietly. Celeste turned when she heard the door open. Mrs. Carter, Dominic said, I'd like to speak with you, and I'd like Porter to step in as well. He looked at Zara. There's a chair in the waiting area right outside. The one by the window. There's good light there, I'm told. Zara understood. She picked up her sketch pad. She went to the chair by the window. She could see the city from there, October gray and sprawling, ordinary and enormous. The kind of view that reminds you the world is very large and contains a great many things that have nothing to do with the thing that is happening to you right now. She found this oddly comforting. She opened her sketch pad. She did not draw. She thought. She thought about the satellite room and the careful voice. She thought about section 7.4c and the language that looked like something else. She thought about her mother's name in that voice's mouth. She thought about the log in the document room and the green tab folder and the way the change had been attributed to the general document account. She thought about what I've handled it might mean, and she thought about it carefully because she understood that there were several different things it could mean, and she did not want to land on the most frightening one without evidence. But she was 11 years old, and she had grown up watching her mother be underestimated, and she knew something about the ways the world protected certain people from consequences while leaving others exposed. She knew that handling a problem sometimes meant eliminating it, and she knew that her mother, meticulous, record-keeping, documentation chain-respecting Celeste Carter, was not the kind of problem that got eliminated easily. She held that knowledge the way she'd learned to hold difficult things. Carefully, without crushing it, without putting it down. She watched a cloud move across the October sky. She waited. Underscore. She waited for 41 minutes. She counted them, not anxiously, but in the way she counted things when her mind needed something to hold, a measuring function, a small structure to lean against. At the 41st minute, Dominic Whitmore came out of his office alone. He walked to the chair by the window, and he sat down in the one beside hers. Not across from her, beside her, facing the same direction, both of them looking at the window and the city beyond it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your mother's going to be all right." Zara let out a breath she had not been aware of holding. "She's with Porter right now, going through the documentation log from the last 3 weeks," he said. "We're going to need her help understanding the document trail. She's agreed to cooperate." He paused. "She's also fairly upset with you." "I know," Zara said. "She'll get over it." Zara looked at him sideways. There was something in his voice, not quite amusement, but in the neighborhood of it, a slight warming of the measured tone. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we find out exactly what was changed, when, and who directed the change," he said. "And then we have a larger conversation." He looked at the window. "The contract won't be signed today." "Or at all?" Zara asked. "Not in this form," he said. "No." She nodded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He turned his head slightly toward her. "If I hadn't come in," she said, "if I'd stayed in the waiting room, would you have caught it?" He was quiet for long enough that she understood it was a real question he was considering rather than one he'd already answered. "Possibly," he said finally. "I read contracts carefully. I might have flagged it on the final pass." A pause. But this was the final pass, and it was written to survive a careful read. He looked at her. "You had information I didn't have. You knew what had been said in that room. Without that," he stopped. "I don't know." She nodded. "The woman in the satellite room," Zara said. "Renata." He said nothing. "What will happen to her?" The temperature of his voice shifted. Not angry, but something that closed off slightly, the way a door closes that had been standing open. "That's not something I can discuss with you." "Okay," she said. They sat quietly for a moment. The city continued beyond the window. "Your mother talks about documents," he said. "She thinks out loud about them," Zara said. "She doesn't tell me what they say, just how they work. The medicine and the poison," he said. She looked at him. "You remember that." "I remember things people say when they're telling me something useful." He paused. "It's a good framework." "She's right. She usually is," Zara said. Another silence. Easier than the earlier ones. The kind of silence between two people who have said the important things and are letting them settle. "I'd like to do something for your family," he said. "When this is resolved, I want to be clear that it's not payment. You didn't do this for payment, and I know that. But I'd like to do something real. Something that matters." Zara looked at him. She had prepared for this possibility too, though not as thoroughly as she'd prepared for the others. "My mom wouldn't want charity," she said. "I know that," he said. "I've worked with her for 3 years. I'm aware of how she operates." A pause. "I'm thinking of something else. An acknowledgement. Something that reflects what actually happened here." He looked at her. "Let me think about what that looks like." "Can you let me do that?" She considered him. She was considering whether he was a person whose thinking she could trust, and she was doing it the way she did most things, methodically, based on evidence, giving appropriate weight to what she had observed rather than what she assumed. What she had observed was a man who had listened to an 11-year-old without performing patience, who had asked her what she heard before asking her what she thought, who had noticed the half-finished sentence about her mother's name and held it carefully for 30 minutes before returning it, who had told her the truth about the uncertainty. "I don't know," when the easier answer would have been, "Yes, of course I would have caught it." "Yes," she said. "You can think about it." He stood. He put his hands in the pockets of his suit jacket and looked at the window for a moment, and then at her. "Your mother is a good woman," he said. "She raised you well." Zara said, "I know." He almost smiled. Not quite, but the corners of his face did something that was the precursor to it. "Stay here," he said. "I'll have someone bring her out when we're done." He went back into the office. Zara opened her sketch pad. This time she drew. She drew the city outside the window, the buildings and the October sky and the cloud she'd been watching, which had moved to the left and changed shape since she'd first noticed it. She drew it carefully, with the attention she brought to things she wanted to remember exactly right. She was on her second sketch when her mother came out. Understood. Celeste Carter stood in the doorway of the waiting area for a moment, looking at her daughter. She had the expression she made in the kitchen sometimes, late at night, when she thought Zara was asleep and she was sitting at the table with something on her mind that she hadn't decided what to do with yet. The expression that was not sadness and not exhaustion, but something between them that had no single name. Zara looked up. Her mother walked to the chair beside her. She sat down. She looked at the window. "You read the contract," Celeste said. "Yes." "In the document room." "Yes." Without permission. Zara held her gaze. "I needed to understand what I'd heard." Her mother was quiet. She was doing the thing where she held something and turned it over, examining it from different angles before she decided what it was. "What did you hear?" Celeste asked. "In the satellite room." "What made you stop?" "They said your name," Zara said. Her mother turned to look at her then. Really look at her. The full attention of it. The way Celeste looked at things she needed to see completely. "My name," she said. "They said you were meticulous, and that it might be a complication. And the woman said she'd handled it." Zara held her mother's eyes. "I didn't know what it meant. I still don't know exactly. But I didn't like the way she said it." Her mother exhaled slowly. She looked at the window again. "You should have told me," she said. "I thought about it," Zara said. "But I thought if I told you, you'd have to do something with it. And I didn't want to put that on you until I knew more." A long pause. "You were protecting me," Celeste said. Zara didn't answer because the answer was obvious and they both knew it. Her mother put her arm around her and pulled her close, the way she did when Zara was smaller, the way that still fit even though Zara was not small anymore. She held her for a moment without speaking. "You're 11 years old," she said finally. "I know," Zara said. "You read a corporate contract. The important parts. You walked into the CEO's office. You weren't there to stop me." Her mother laughed. A real one, short and surprised, not quite like any laugh Zara had heard from her before, which was itself something. Celeste Carter was not a person who was often genuinely surprised. "You're going to give me gray hair," her mother said. "You already have gray hair," Zara said. "You say it's distinguished." Another surprised laugh. They sat together at the window. October light came in at an angle now, warmer than it had been that morning, and the cloud Zara had been drawing had broken apart and scattered. "He's a good man," her mother said quietly, not asking, telling her. "I think so," Zara said. "He listened to you. Eventually." "He listened to you," her mother said again, with a weight behind the word listen that Zara understood completely. The recognition of something that was not always given, especially not in rooms like that one, especially not to people who looked like the two of them. "He did," Zara said. Her mother held her tighter for a moment. Outside the city continued. Inside the 42nd floor was quiet in the way it was always quiet, people moving carefully through spaces where important things were decided. But something had shifted in it, something small and permanent, the kind of shift that doesn't announce itself but is there forever after in the grain of the thing. They stayed by the window until someone came to tell them it was time. 3 weeks passed before Dominic Whitmore called Celeste Carter into his office. In those 3 weeks, several things happened. Zara was told about them in pieces, in the careful way her mother shared information. Enough to understand, not more than was necessary. This was how Celeste had always operated, in the document room and at the kitchen table both. Precision over volume, the right amount of the right thing. Renata Hollis resigned on the Friday after the contract. The resignation was described in the building as mutual and amicable, which is the language organizations use when the truth is complicated and the lawyers have agreed on a version that protects everyone equally and satisfies no one entirely. Zara understood this. She did not ask for details her mother hadn't offered. She filed the fact in the organized drawer of her mind and moved on. The Meridian Group partnership was renegotiated from the beginning. New legal team. New drafting process. The resulting agreement was 60 pages instead of 32, because when you discover that someone has been careful about what they hid, you become more careful about what you expose. The new contract, her mother said, had mutual audit provisions, genuinely mutual, both parties, neutral arbiter, no ambiguity. She said this the way she said most things, factually, without drama. But she said it. The document room implemented a new access protocol. Only Celeste and her 2 senior technicians could touch executive-level final review packages from that point forward. Every access was logged with a timestamp and a signature. The protocol was Celeste's design. Dominic had asked her to design it, which was its own kind of acknowledgement, and Celeste had designed it the way she designed everything she cared about, thoroughly, without gaps. Porter, the young man from legal who had brought the change log to the office, had been assigned to a new role overseeing contract revision tracking. He'd stopped by the document room once, stood in the doorway, and said thank you to Celeste, who had told him she didn't know what he was thanking her for, which was precisely true and not entirely the whole picture. Zara had gone back to school. She had her desk by the window, and her books, and the particular life of an 11-year-old that continued regardless of what the larger world was doing. Homework, lunch, the friend who could draw horses perfectly, the cafeteria that always served the same vegetables on Wednesdays. She moved through those weeks without telling anyone what had happened because she had been asked not to, and because she was good at holding things quietly, and because there was a part of her that understood that not every significant thing needs to be announced. Sometimes a thing is real without being spoken. Sometimes it is more real for remaining private. But she thought about it. She was always thinking about something, and for those 3 weeks, this was the thing she thought about most. She thought about Section 7.4c, and the way it had been written, not clumsily, not obviously, but with the particular craftsmanship of someone who had done it before, who understood how people read and what they were likely to skip. She thought about the voice in the satellite room, controlled and professional, and the things that voice had not said. She thought about what her mother had told her once, sitting at the kitchen table with a manual she was reviewing about the medicine and the poison and the way dangerous language always lives beside the language you trust. She thought about trust, about what it meant to be trusted with things, documents, information, people's private business, and what it meant when that trust was used for something other than what it was given for. She thought about her mother's name in that room, about the particular quality of that word, meticulous, when it was spoken as a problem rather than a compliment. She thought about what she would have done if she had stayed in the waiting room, if she had counted to 30 and sat back down and drawn the city and said nothing. She thought about this not with guilt. She had not stayed in the waiting room, and she did not regret it, but with the serious attention she brought to hypotheticals, because understanding what might have been helps you understand what is. She thought about all of it carefully from multiple angles over 3 weeks. On a Tuesday in November, Celeste came home from work and sat across from Zara at the kitchen table and said, "Mr. Whitmore wants to meet with us. Both of us." Thursday afternoon. Zara looked up from her homework. "Okay." Her mother looked at her for a moment. "He said he's thought about what he wanted to do. He said he wanted to tell you directly." A pause. "He also said you asked him something, whether he would have caught it, if you'd done what I told you and stayed in the waiting room." "I asked if he would have found the clause," Zara said. "He told me he thought about that question for 3 days." Her mother's voice was careful and even, the way it always was with important things. "He said he wanted you to know that." Zara held that for a moment. Then she went back to her homework. "Mom," she said. "Yes. Are you still angry with me?" Her mother was quiet for a moment. Outside, November pressed against the window, cold and definite about it, not apologizing. Inside the apartment was warm in the particular way of a home that has been made carefully, over time, by 2 people who know each other completely. "I was never angry," Celeste said. "I was scared. Those are different things." "I know the difference," Zara said. Her mother reached across the table and put her hand over Zara's. "You did something brave," she said, "and I'm allowed to be scared by brave things. That's what it means to love someone. You get scared when they do brave things, even when the brave thing was right." Zara turned her hand over and held her mother's. They stayed like that, at the kitchen table in the warm apartment, in November for a while. Thursday afternoon. The 42nd floor again. The same thick carpet. The same even light. The same sculptures in the alcoves that Zara catalogued as she walked, without appearing to look at them. The waiting area by the window where 3 weeks ago she had sat and counted 41 minutes and drawn the October sky. The sky was different now. November gray, lower and more deliberate, without October's complicated shifting light. She noted it and filed it. Dominic Whitmore came out of his office to greet them himself rather than sending his assistant. He shook Celeste's hand, and then he looked at Zara and said, "Thank you for coming back," as if she had agreed to be here, as if this were something she had chosen rather than something she had been brought to. She recognized the small courtesy of it, the way it treated her as a person with agency, and she appreciated it without saying so. "Of course," she said. His office felt different in November light. Same dimensions, same desk, same window over the city, but the quality of the light through the glass was softer and less precise, and the city beneath a low sky looked more contained. More like something you could hold in your mind rather than something that held you. He sat across from them, not behind his desk this time, but in one of the chairs arranged on the near side, so that the three of them formed a loose triangle with nothing between them but open floor. Zara noticed this. It was a choice. The desk would have put something between them, and he had chosen not to have something between them. "I told you I wanted to think about what the right response was," he said. He was looking at Zara. "I meant that. I didn't want to do it quickly. I wanted to get it right." She waited. Her mother waited. Both of them waited in the particular quality of attention the Carter women brought to things that mattered. "I could have given you something," he said. "Money. A fund for school. Something immediate and quantifiable. I thought about it." He paused. "But what happened here wasn't a transaction. It would be wrong to treat it like one. You didn't come into my office because you wanted something from me. You came because you understood that timing mattered and that the right thing required someone to say it." He looked at her steadily. Treating that as a transaction would reduce it. "I wasn't willing to do that." Zara said nothing. Her mother said nothing. "What I want to do," he said, "is something that reflects what actually occurred." He looked at Celeste. "Mrs. Carter, I've been thinking carefully about the Document Services Division. The work you do is foundational. It is literally the final gatekeeping function between a document and the people who sign it. For 3 years, that work has been structurally undervalued. In compensation, in visibility, in institutional recognition." He paused, and the pause had weight. "I've spoken with HR and my CFO. Your title is changing to Director of Document Integrity, effective the 1st of December. The compensation reflects that title accurately, and the division will report directly to my office rather than through the operations chain." Celeste was very still. "I want to be clear," he said. "This is not charity, and it is not a reward. It is a correction. The role should have been structured that way from the beginning. I wasn't paying sufficient attention to what was happening on the 41st floor, and I should have been." He looked at her directly. "I am now." Celeste held herself very straight. When she spoke, her voice was steady, which Zara recognized as the effort was the trained steadiness of a woman who has spent years holding her composure in rooms that tested it, and who is now being tested in a different and more complicated way. "Thank you," she said. 2 words, and she meant every syllable of both of them. He nodded. Then he looked at Zara. "For you," he said, "something different. Something that belongs specifically to you." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, which was a different posture from the measured stillness of 3 weeks ago. More direct, less formal. "This firm administers a scholarship program. We established it 7 years ago for students in the city. It covers secondary school and university, includes mentorship throughout, and has a strong record of placing students where they want to go." He paused. "I'd like you to be considered for it. Not given it. Considered." You go through the same application process as every other candidate. Same criteria, same evaluation committee, same timeline. He held her gaze. I won't influence the outcome. Zara looked at him. But you'll tell them you nominated me. Yes, he said. I'll tell the selection committee that I nominated you personally. And I'll tell them why. What will you tell them? He didn't hesitate. He had thought about this. She could tell, the same way she thought about things she needed to say precisely. That you read a document you were not permitted to read because you were trying to protect someone you love, he said. That you walked into an office where you had no business being because you understood that the timing was the point, that waiting would have been the same as doing nothing. That when you reported what you had seen and heard, you reported it precisely, without inflation or embellishment, and that the precision was what made it actionable. He paused, and that when I asked you what you knew, you separated what you knew from what you didn't know, and told me both things distinctly. Because you understood that those are different categories, and that confusing them would have been a failure. The room was quiet. That's what I'll tell them, he said. The rest is yours. She thought about it. She let it sit in her the way she let important things sit, without rushing toward a conclusion, letting the shape of the thing become clear before she named it. The other students who apply, she said, they've done the work for it. They've earned their consideration. They have, he said, and you won't make the committee choose me over someone who's earned it more. He looked at her. No, I won't. She thought about this. She thought about whether that was enough, whether a nomination from a man who had listened to her, in a process that treated her the same as everyone else, was something she could accept without it meaning something she didn't want it to mean. She decided that it was. Okay, she said. Thank you. I'll apply. Something in his expression settled. Not relief exactly, but a small closing of something that had been held open, the way a door closes gently when it has been waiting to close. Good, he said. He looked at the window for a moment. Outside, November held the city in its low gray light, patient and even, neither warm nor harsh. Just present. Zara looked at it too. I've been thinking about what you asked me, he said, the day you came in. Whether I would have caught it, the clause, on my own. She waited. I've reviewed contracts more carefully than I reviewed that one, he said. I knew the negotiation. I trusted the process. I was looking for confirmation rather than looking. He paused. The clause was written to survive a careful reading by someone who trusted the context. I trusted the context. He looked at her. You didn't. You came to that document without context, without trust, without any assumption about what it was supposed to say. You read what it said, not what it was supposed to say. That's a different kind of reading. My mom taught me that, Zara said. I know, he said. He looked at Celeste. You taught her to read what's there rather than what's meant to be there. Celeste said, I taught her to read documents. I didn't teach her to read other people's documents without permission. No, he said. And there it was, the precursor to the smile, the motion the corners of his face made that stop just short of completion. I imagine not. He stood. He extended his hand to Celeste, and she took it. Then he extended his hand to Zara. Not the same gesture as opening a door and telling her she could stay, but something more deliberate, a different kind of acknowledgement. She shook his hand. His grip was firm and brief and meant what it was. Good luck with the application, he said, though I suspect you'll approach it the way you approach most things. How's that? She said. Carefully, he said, and accurately. She nodded once. They left. Underscore. The elevator ride down was quiet in the way that the aftermath of important things is often quiet, not empty, but full of things that didn't need to be said yet. The lobby opened around them, and they walked out into the November afternoon. Cold air, immediate and sharp, the city's particular November smell, something metallic and dry underneath everything else, the smell of a city settling into the serious part of the year. They walked side by side. Celeste's arm came around Zara's shoulders without either of them deciding it. The way certain gestures happen, not chosen, but simply there, the body knowing before the mind does. Director of Document Integrity, Zara said. Don't, her mother said. I'm not doing anything. You have a face. Zara said, nothing for half a block. Then, it's the right title. It is, her mother said. And beneath the professional steadiness, the thing Zara had been waiting for, the warmth, real and unguarded, the sound of someone receiving something they had not let themselves want, because wanting it had felt like tempting the world to take it away. Celeste Carter had worked 3 years in that document room, and she had been precise and thorough and irreplaceable, and none of that had been acknowledged in the specific, structural way that acknowledgement actually means something. And now it had been, and her daughter was beside her, and it was November, and they were walking toward the bus stop. Mom, Zara said, I'm going to get the scholarship. Her mother glanced at her sideways. You haven't applied yet. I know. I'm going to apply, and I'm going to get it. That's not how it works. You go through the process like everyone else. I know how it works, Zara said. I'm still going to get it. Celeste looked at her. The smile was happening, the one that started in her eyes 3 full seconds before it reached her mouth, the one that meant, yes, probably you impossible child, yes. You are entirely too confident, her mother said. I'm accurate, Zara said. Celeste laughed. The real one, the short surprised one that had a different quality than any other laugh she made, the one that meant something had genuinely caught her off guard, which was not a thing that happened easily. Zara had been collecting those laughs for 11 years. She kept them carefully in the same place she kept the important things. They reached the bus stop. 2 other people waiting, an older man with a paper bag, a woman in a yellow coat looking at her phone. Ordinary. The ordinary texture of an ordinary street in November in a city that had no idea what had happened over the last 3 weeks on the 42nd floor of a building 6 blocks behind them. Zara looked back at the building. She could see the top floors from here, the glass catching the low light of the November afternoon. Somewhere up there, behind one of those windows, a document had been closed and put away and would not be opened again except in legal proceedings. Somewhere up there, an office she had walked into when she was not supposed to had already resumed being the ordinary office it was on every other day. She thought about Renata Hollis, briefly. She thought about her the way she thought about the parts of a story that don't resolve neatly. Not with bitterness, not with satisfaction, but with the serious attention of someone who understands that people do harmful things for reasons that are usually not simple, and that understanding this does not mean excusing it, and that holding both those things at once is harder than choosing one. She thought about the satellite room, the careful voice, the things not said, the particular craft of a deception that works by omission rather than invention, that takes the truth and removes a piece of it and hands you what remains and lets you fill in the missing piece with your own assumptions. She had not been able to fill it in with her own assumptions. She had gone looking for the missing piece instead. She thought about the document room, her mother's domain, the place that smelled like toner and paper and the faint chemical coolness of climate control, the place where every significant piece of paper at Whitmore Capital came to rest before it moved forward into the world. She thought about the weight her mother gave to that responsibility, the seriousness of it, the understanding that the pages were not just paper. They were decisions, obligations, the formal structure of things that affected people's lives and livelihoods. Every page matters, her mother had said. Not every page looks like it matters, but every page does. She had believed this. She had believed it even when she was supposed to be invisible, even when she was supposed to be in the waiting room drawing the city and saying nothing. She had believed it enough to do something about it. She was glad she had. The bus came around the corner, yellow and familiar and on time. The man with the paper bag moved forward. The woman in the yellow coat put her phone away. Celeste and Zara stepped to the curb. Before they got on, Zara looked back at the building one more time. She thought about what he had said. You read what it said, not what it was supposed to say. And she thought about her mother, who had taught her this without ever intending to teach it, by thinking out loud at the kitchen table over years, by treating documents with the seriousness they deserved, by demonstrating that paying attention is not passive. It is a form of care. She thought about what the scholarship might become. Not with entitlement. She had not been given it. She would apply for it. She would make the case for herself in writing and in person, and she would do it well because she did things well. But she allowed herself, for the first time, to think about what a door opening might look like. What might lead to the particular shape of a future that was larger than the one she had been planning for. Not because the planning had been small, but because the door had not existed yet, and now it did. She thought about her mother standing straighter when she described the new protocol. Director of Document Integrity. The right title, finally, for the right work, 3 years later than it should have been. A correction, he had called it. Not a gift, not a reward, a correction. The setting right of something that should always have been right. She thought about what it meant that he had made the distinction, that he had thought about it carefully enough to name it correctly. She thought about listening, about what it meant to be listened to by someone who had no obligation to listen, about the particular quality of attention he had brought to an 11-year-old girl in his office, attention that did not perform patience, but simply was patient, that did not manage her, but engage with her, that took what she said seriously because she had said it seriously. She would remember that. She would carry it the way she carried the things that mattered, in the organized drawer, in the right order, where she could find it when she needed it. The bus doors opened. "Come on," her mother said. Zara got on. They found seats together near the middle. Celeste by the window, Zara beside her, the city moving past the glass as the bus pulled into traffic. Buildings and street lights, and other people's lives glimpsed through other windows. The endless, ordinary texture of a city going about its business. Celeste reached over and tucked a strand of Zara's hair back without thinking about it. The automatic gesture of a mother, the kind that requires no decision. Zara let her. They rode in the comfortable quiet of two people who have said the important things and are letting them settle. Outside, November continued, cold and honest about it, the serious part of the year, the part that doesn't make promises it can't keep. Zara leaned slightly against her mother's shoulder. She thought about the October day. She had sat in a chair by a window on the 42nd floor and counted 41 minutes and drawn a cloud that had since broken apart and scattered. She thought about how much had changed in the weeks between that day and this one, and how much had not changed at all. Her mother was still her mother. She was still herself. The apartment was still warm. The heating system was still slightly too loud. The books were still on the shelves where they had always been. Some things change because one person decides to do the right thing in the right moment. And some things stay exactly as they should be because they were always right and the world simply caught up. Both of those things were true at once. She was good at holding two things at once. The bus moved through the November city, and Zara Carter went home. Underscore. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another child the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.